welcome from the Republic of Cork. I hope you haven't missed the red. Now, I want to leave as much time as I can for Brian to speak to you, so I'm literally just going to frame our presentation. Now, as you see, it's about addressing the why of UDL. And I have given you, as you see in this PowerPoint, you can't see it now on the slides, but if you get into the PowerPoint, I have written detailed notes on each slide. So as well, I intend for that reason not to delay in detail. Now, this is our campus, as you see here, since 1845, built between 1845 and 1847, and our intention is to make this a UDL campus, and we have been working fairly tirelessly at doing this, and we're going to try and talk a little of how we did it. Now, of course, you have to start with the culture, you have to start where you're at, and this is one of the things I think that's already come up today. Now, in terms of UCC, we are blessed that we have the one and only motto, as far as I know, certainly in the Republic, where teaching and learning appear in the one sentence. I'd be very delighted to know if there are other universities here, and if you'd look at your coats of arms and crests and tell me if teaching and learning appear in the one sentence. And it says, where Finbar taught, let Munster learn. And this is very important to us. There's no longer just Munster, of course, it's a global context, but that teaching and learning should be symbiotically linked in the one statement. Says a lot about the importance of that relationship and about the importance of learning in the context of teaching at UCC, and I've tried to build on that culture. I run a suite of certificated programs for staff in teaching and learning in higher education. I am the director of the Teaching and Learning Centre, and that has been my main role for many years to really try and upskill the staff, and we have over 70% of UCC staff. That's the staff who teach, academics, administrators, researchers, postdocs. We have over 70% of staff now with a qualification in teaching and learning in higher ed, the highest in the country, which is why we got the Sunday Times Award again. Now, just to get that in. Now, I want the next two slides, if you see, this is the West Lodge where the Teaching and Learning Centre is. It's a set of offices, but what I want you to note, because I'm very keen on the signs and symbols of our institutions, the settings, which indeed tell 1,000 messages and give us, there's a lot of subliminal things going on that will help us to embed UDL, and that's what I'm after as well, how we can do this. Now, there in that little house, there in the West Lodge, you see how adjacent we are to the main, one of the main buildings, to the council room and the Aula Maxima. So it is very important that the Teaching and Learning Centre is literally at the centre, and we are in the main campus. We're the point of entry from the Western Road, and this is a key, I think, aspect. So it gives new meaning to the notion of gatekeeping. We're not trying to close the gates, we're trying to keep them open. And then we have the South Lodge, which is where Brian is in the DSS and where Marian has been for the last 19 years in the Disability Support Service. The great thing about that is that was the Teaching and Learning Centre before that. So again, there's a lovely synergy and symbiotic relationship between the two. So they're the South Lodge, and if you like, command the entrance from the College Road, and we're the West Lodge and command the entrance from the Western Road. And between us, of course, we're going to change the world. So this is how are we doing it, and how do we try to move forward in embedding UDL? The first thing is we're drawing on, which we have done for many years at UCC in our courses, the scholarship of teaching and learning. Now, because I've spoken in depth at this at other conferences here at AHEAD, I'm not going to dwell on it in depth. But just to say that you see there playing on my right and your left, the corner, and teaching, and making the link between students and teaching. And research and teaching. Ernest Boyer in 1990, in order to get over the polarity between research and teaching, said, listen, we have to stop this. We have to stop buying ourselves out of our teaching every time we get a research grant, and we have to take the teaching seriously and turn it into research. And he said there's not just one scholarship, there are 4 of them. Discovery, integration, application, and the scholarship of teaching. When you come upon one, indeed, you come upon them all, but we are particularly interested in the latter and in integrating research, teaching, and learning, and documenting that process. So one of the things we're also drawing on is the theory of multiple intelligences. We were lucky at UCC under Anya Hyland to have a project on this for 5, indeed to 10 years at the Harvard Grad School, working on this and on multiple intelligences theory and teaching for understanding. Now, these are absolutely key, if you like, lenses for us to develop UDL. In this particular one, for example, the Teaching for Understanding framework, you see here a bit like what Katie put up this morning when you think of design, curriculum design, learning, assessment, the same in our new guidelines in the UDLL. The integration of these, we have to be strategic, we have to have understanding goals, we have to teach generatively, the part in relation to the whole, not get bogged down in the text. And we have to open up performances of understanding for our students, in the doing of understanding, the myriad ways we can do it, the creative active performance, the teaching outside the box, and note the ongoing assessment, ongoing, continuous, dialogical, formative, diagnostic, not terminal and at the end and too late. So this is the heart of the matter for us. And then also that Teaching for Understanding framework gives us another wonderful disciplinary framework that says all disciplines have these 4 in common, all have knowledge, so that we're asking, like, how does the expert think? You know, what questions does he ask? The method, how does he do that thinking? The purpose, why do we think like this? And the various forms we can express ourselves. So this speaks again eminently to UDL, because we need to think outside the box again with our students. We have them calcified and paralysed in far too narrow forms, for example, of expressing themselves. In terminal exams, in stuffy theatres for 3 hours at the end. Whereas that's not how we behave in the discipline. So how an expert thinks and how he communicates, you might have a report, it might be an interview, yes, indeed, it might be a paper, it might be a discussion at a conference like we're doing now. So the ways in which we open up, how we're thinking as well in the disciplines and in the universities. Now, mapping this on then to UDL. Now, I put up, already Katie has put up this slide for you this morning, but you see our 3 networks, recognition, strategic and effective networks, and we are primarily focused on the effective networks in this presentation. But to think of the what of learning, the recognition networks, that's our multiple ways of representing. So we're trying, in the various ways that Brian will talk to you in a minute now, of doing this. Strategically, again, we're trying to get the students involved, the students who are our staff, in various ways of action and expression. And ultimately, though, it is about engaging them, for this speaks to the core of the brain, as it were. And that's where the heart of the matter is. And if you don't have people involved at that level, if it doesn't mean anything at the level of heart, if it's not compelling, life is far too short for us to be teaching the wrong thing, to be doing the wrong thing, to be spending hours learning stuff off by heart that no one understands. So we are speaking particularly to these guidelines. Now, this is wonderful that we have our new guidelines, and I was involved with that through AHEAD, which is a wonderful resource. But I am speaking for the purpose of this, just to the guidelines from the CAST site, 7, 8 and 9, to do with the effective networks, lest there be confusion. But of course, they also address, we're particularly keen on addressing, I suppose, 3, 4, 5 and 6 of the new guidelines, so we can see, and later maybe next year we'll tease that out and what our combination is. But here we're providing options for recruiting interest. How do you hold them, like individualizing choice and autonomy? How are we trying to do that with the staff at UCC? How are we trying to optimize relevance and value for them? How are we trying also under, providing options for sustaining effort and persistence? How are we trying to heighten the salience of goals and that, and give them goals and direction, and vary resources, and increase mastery-orientated feedback? At UCC, the staff have to give us feedback before we give it to them. They have to fill in the rubric. I'll show you in a minute how that happens. Because we want mastery-orientated feedback, not slavish-orientated feedback, but to get them to be independent, that we need to think of self-peer and teacher assessment. We're far too reliant on teacher assessment. And then that last checkpoint, providing options for self-regulation. So again, promoting the expectations and beliefs for staff to optimize motivation so that they can pass the same on to their students, and facilitating personal coping skills and strategies. Now, so again, when they have to cope with how do they put up a new course, how are they going to think outside the box, how will they problematize it, this is important also for the staff as well as the students. As Katie Novak said this morning, we are all in this. We are all doing the learning and the teaching, not just the students. Now, so the next, yes. Now, I just want to speak briefly to this. Going back to the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, this is one of the great tools of SOTL, of the Scholarship of Teaching and Learning, the course portfolio, Pat Hutchins' work in the 1998, as fresh today as when it was first written. And we get our staff in the second year of the work of the diploma, and this is what Brian is going to talk of in a moment, to create a course portfolio whereby they take one course that they're teaching it and they look at its design, its teaching and its student learning. And we get them to use the TFU and the UDL lens to problematize and critique the course. And that is, so for example, and you can, as I say, read the notes in detail in the presentation. So the first in the rubric, so we have rubrics for everything so that we're clear, accountable, and the student must fill in the rubric as well before they hand up the assignment. So as you see in entry 1, they must look at the course context and its history, and teaching for understanding and UDL context of it and its design, and they have 4 weeks to do a draft of this entry. And they share the draft with a critical friend in their group, and then they post the draft entry to the tutor via the Dropbox or the Blackboard by the 13th of February 2017, which is just quite recently, so our research is very up to date. And you see we put in the first voice what they're to do. So this is an instructional rubric. I have contextualized the course and focused on its history and design. I have critiqued the course in the light of TFU and UDL, and I have included a graphic organizer or map of my design. My evidence has been discussed and embedded in my entry, and I have contributed meaningfully and critically to discussion 1 to build the entry. Now, just for you to see discussion 1, in this discussion forum that the staff also have, they're in little groups of 6 together working throughout the year. This is an online program, so we try to encourage them to make sense of things and keep going, and each group has its own tutor, and Brian is going to talk about his group and his discussions with them. And the design entry, for example, is scaffolded by a 4-week discussion, and the first 2 weeks of the discussion are about teaching for understanding, so that builds on what they've done as well in the first year, and the second one is about the UDL, Universal Design for Learning, and how, for example, they're doing that. So they're asked, for example, discuss how you are responding to the 3 principles of UDL, multiple ways of representation, of action and expression, and of engagement. What challenges do you face in redesigning your module using TFU and UDL perspectives? So this is what we're really focused on now in trying in those course portfolios. So I'm delighted now to invite Brian to the stage to talk about this. So I'll just leave those questions up, maybe, Brian. Sorry, I'll go back a little. And then I hope I haven't overdone the time so that you have time to talk about it in some detail. Okay. Now, so Brian, I'll come up with me. So we have, now Brian, I put you in front of the mic here.
Thank you, Marian.
Exactly, so this we have.
No,
Yeah,
thanks.
Great.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'll just go through a few examples in the group that I look after, and I will just, I suppose, demonstrate how they have been putting this work into action, how they've been applying teaching for understanding, a performance view of understanding, and the principles of universal design for learning to their modules. First of all, I'll just talk about Kevin Murphy, who teaches in pharmacy in UCC, and Kevin talks about a module given to pharmacy students third year into their studies. They already have 2 years of learning under their belts, so they have quite a lot of knowledge and quite a lot of theory. But this module that he's talking about is their first opportunity to experience some clinical practice. And the teaching in this module, he divides into 3 parts, 3 different types of teaching. He has a lecture situation, tutorials, and he has lab sessions. And in the lectures, he ensures that he uses as much variety and diversity in the way he presents the information as possible, using methods such as text, image and video, and he also allows for interaction and discussion in the lectures themselves. What goes on in the lectures, the information in all of the sessions is running parallel, so that the knowledge and theory involved in each one will impact on the other. The tutorials then, in the tutorials, the teacher speaks as little as possible. It's the students who speak. It's here that the students begin to teach one another and peer learning takes place. The tutorials have the students divided into groups in roundtable discussions in which they're all given case studies to deal with. First half of the tutorial, the students deal with these case studies as the teacher moves around the room, keeping an eye on what's going on and facilitating students as necessary. Second half of the tutorial, they present their findings, and in this situation, there are questions and answers, and students can interact with the presenters, and a lot of feedback is provided. Feedback to the students themselves, but also feedback to a teacher who takes an investigative approach to his teaching. So this works very well, and we also then have the lab sessions. The lab sessions are not a lab like a chemistry lab. These labs are actual pharmacy settings, and these create situations in which these students will work as pharmacists when they begin their work. So they're provided with prescriptions, and students work alone, and they have to fill these prescriptions. They have to draw on a lot of data and a lot of theory, and they have to do a lot of safety checks, and they may have to make a phone call to the person who wrote the prescription to get some extra information, but this also are things they'll do when they need to deal with other medical professionals in the job. So this works very well also as learning in action, where their classroom work is put into action, and they're also provided with feedback. One thing I left out of the tutorial is the students also have an opportunity to do a bit of patient counselling role play. In some of the tutorials, the students are divided into 3 groups, or sorry, not into 3 groups, in several groups of 3 students. And in the groups of 3, one student would be the pharmacist, one would be the patient, and one would be an observer. These are difficult situations because the pharmacy student can be presented with difficult problems to solve, and he has to draw on a lot of data and analyse that data and make decisions such as what will he administer, or she, or what will whether she needs to refer the patient to the doctor. So I won't go into it now, but you can see in the guidelines of we'll say multiple forms of engagement, which addresses the why of learning. You can see where there is opportunity for student autonomy. That there's definitely these situations definitely promote relevance, value, and authenticity of the material they are learning. And you also have plenty of feedback. You have group collaboration, which means a lot to the students, and it causes a good sense of community. I'll leave that. I'll just the next student I'll talk about is Dr. Karen Dennehy, and she teaches medical students. And again, it's in the third year of their learning. They have a lot of learning under their belts. They have this will be their first patient experience, real proper patient experience, and it's a very stressful environment in the hospital. It's a difficult time for students, so they need a lot of support. She provides classroom settings for them where the role play and case studies are used, and she prepares them to meet the patients. When they meet the patients, what she emphasises more than anything is that they act with professionalism and courtesy. She also promotes as their most important skill the skill of good communication. Karen points to research where it shows that 70% of clinical data is derived just through good engagement with the patient and just listening to their story. You can be amazed what clinical data this will provide. So this is all very important. Students have to go out, meet their patients, see how they get on. They have to come back to Karen with the information. But Karen ensures that they can all present it in whatever way they wish. Some will present it in a more diagrammatic way where they like to use diagrams. Others will write a good set of clinical notes all laid out, and others will use narrative where they will just write things down as the patient said it. All is acceptable to Karen as long as the information is there. And then they also have to point out the weaknesses in their learning. She will not accept a student coming back to say that they learned nothing, because every patient encounter, according to Karen, is a learning experience. So I won't go into it, but there you can see all the places where the why of learning is addressed and multiple forms of engagement take place within the UDL principle structure. One other thing there is that she also allows for student reflective learning. The students write down the important things that they've learned in a diary, and they can reflect on this. This is good for self-regulation and is a valuable learning experience. Finally, I'll just mention briefly Jerry Murphy, who teaches a completely different course. Jerry is teaching the Certificate in Contemporary Living, and this is a course for students with intellectual disabilities, and these students range from 18 to maybe in their 50s. The student helps these, the course helps these students with personal and social development. There are a lot of skills they learn, as simple as taking public transport and we'll say managing in the shop and managing their change and so on and so forth. Making decisions, we'll say not so important decisions on their own, and knowing when to get help and where to avail for help too, to where to avail of the help they need. So it's an important course. It gives these students an experience of the university campus which they would never have the opportunity to have otherwise. It helps greatly in their self-esteem, great interaction with other students. These students are provided with surveys and different types of surveys. They conducted a survey to with regard to access to buildings, and it gave them a great sense of empowerment because they made up a letter afterwards and sent it to the relevant authorities, to the Buildings and Estates Office with their recommendations. They also get great support from Disability Support Services at University College Cork. They avail of sign language for students with hearing impairments. the classes use sign language interpreters. They also avail of the technology lab that the Disability Support Service provides, where they can learn assistive technology, and this is done at the beginning of their course so that they can avail of assistive technology throughout their programme of study. It's a 2-year programme, very important one, and Jerry shows us in many ways in which they are engaged. They use many different types of learning. They use classroom, they use outings, they use music, dance, art, they use all sorts of ways. I have just rushed this so much, but anyway, it's just to give you an idea of what the teachers doing the diploma in teaching and learning in higher education are learning, and they are really doing their best to implement UDL through the framework of teaching for understanding. So thanks for listening.
Just to say, we are writing, in conclusion, hang on there with me, we are writing a paper on this, which we're in the middle of finishing, and so we will send that on so that you'll have a chance to have a look at those 3 examples again. And of course, we have permission from our 3 wonderful colleagues. I want to thank them again, Kevin Murphy, Carrie Dennehy and Jerry Murphy in different locations in UCC. So look, just finally there's a whole lot of links that you might look at and find useful, and we enjoyed very much preparing for this. I'm afraid we haven't much time now, have we, for questions, but maybe at the end we can, and of course we'll be around. Thank you so much for listening. Okay.